Uh, Oh my GOG, just choose something! Okay. This is fine. This is fine. Jake English's name was suggested by no one, because creator Andrew Hussey was done with fans naming characters at this point. The name Jake is said to have come about as a variation on the names Jack or Jacob, but it's also said to be a deviation of the name John. And considering that he's one of the kids who takes over the main session for John Egbert and friends, it's actually kind of funny. I wonder if it was coincidental. Also, this is a bit embarrassing how late I am to the party on this, but Jake's name was probably a reference to Jake Sully from Avatar. What with his fondness of blue women and all. How long did it take for you to learn that, Jen? Last year? Maybe? I don't have the app, so I just browse the Halloween Snapchats when I had the chance. His last name being English, as stated in the comic, was Alpha Jade's doing, taking the feared name of her adopted grandmother's boss, just to mess with her. All of Jake's allusions to the big bad was also her doing, because she created any of the technology that resembled Lord English, like the skull top, or the computer coat that looks similar to the Cairo overcoat. The allusions to English were so strong that for a time, parts of the fan base assumed that Jake would turn into English himself. Turns out, both Jake and Caliborn are just paradoxically prophesized to have a rivalry to last all of space-time, and both influence the other in various ways. For example, let's take a look at Jake's chum handle, Golgotha's Terror. Most famously, Golgotha is also the name of the ancient place where in 30 AD, Jesus of Nazareth was crucified in order to save the world from their sins. The word Golgotha translates from Greek as place of the skull. It's also known as Calvary, deriving from the Latin phrase calvariae, locus, skull place. So of course Jake loves skulls. It can also refer to a hill or a burial mound, which is also seen in Jake's spur planet, the land of Mountain Xenon, aka Lomax. That's funny, Bernie Lomax. Good thing Jake is so into ruins, since his use of the 2x pistol kind and gun holster is a reference to the Tomb Raider franchise, especially because of his desire to have a pair of short shorts to make the holster look less weird. A shout out to the series protagonist, Lara Croft. Continuing with pop culture references and his love of even the most terrible of movies, Jake's gold pistols are a direct reference to Face Off, because the movie's villain, played by Nick Cage, used the same two guns. And now for a new segment for the series, we're going back to explore the alternate universe. Beta Universe Jake falls to Earth on April 21st, 1910, and accidentally shoots the first person who finds him, humorist Colonel Sassacre. Coincidentally, the Colonel had just adopted a baby girl named Jane, who had entered the universe in a similar fashion 8 days prior. Jake and Jane are then raised as brother and sister by their adoptive grandmother, the sinister Betty Crocker, aka the Condescension. Determined to find adventure and fortune, teenage Jake ran away with the family dog, leaving Jane behind, never to see her again. Due to a speech impediment, he mispronounced the dog's name, Hallie, as Harley, choosing to use the dog's name as his family name. A clever nod by Andrew Hussey to Indiana Jones.
Dog? You are named after the dog?
Got a lot of fond memories of that dog.
Sometime before the 1980s, now billionaire and Skynet founder Jake Harley marries a talented ballerina named A. Claire and has 2 children, Joey and Jude, from the Hive Swap video game. Wait, that would make Jake 70 when he fathered Joey. Sadly, by 83 or 84, Mrs. Claire passes away, and Jake responds by abandoning his children and going on expeditions that go for months on end, leaving his laboratory and offspring in the care of an alcoholic but well-meaning Roxy Lalonde. No one's totally sure why he did this, but 2 of the bigger reasons, in my personal opinion, are a reference to Jake English's doubts that he ever loved anyone, and that he loves isolation. Or maybe because Joey looks too similar to his deceased wife for him to cope with. Anyway, whatever the actual reason or cause, it's greatly assumed that Jake never sees his natural-born children again. Sometime before Hive Swap's Act 1 and the beginning of Homestuck, Jake travels through Paradox Space, collecting trophies and artifacts from the medium, somehow while the game is still in session, even obtaining the dead dream self of Jade Harley and stuffing her. When Jade finally makes it to Earth in December 1995, a year after the events of Hive Swap, Jake ceases his wandering ways and settles on a Pacific island to raise his ectobiological daughter as Grandpa Harley. But not for long. Sometime when Jade was a toddler, she almost shot herself with one of her grandpa's pistols. But Tavros Nitram broke all kinds of time and space to hijack Becquerel, the god dog, to teleport the bullet away. Unfortunately, Tavros saw Grandpa as an intruder and redirected the bullet at him. And thus was the end of Jake Harley. Both versions of Jake go through an odd circle of death. Baby Jake kills the man who would have been his father figure, Sassacre. Tavros and Jade, unwittingly, later kill Jade's father figure, Grandpa Jake. Then Alpha Jake kills Tinkerbell, Tavros' Lucis species, in the ultimate revenge he was not even aware about. Fridge facts, rapid fire, go! Jake is one of the few kids who owns a transmaterializer, sending weapons and a robot rabbit Liv/Terry to the beta universe Jade, and receiving robot parts from Dirk Strider. However, that's not all he received from it. It's been revealed that Jake had been accidentally using his transmaterializer to steal pumpkins from somewhere, meaning that he has been partially responsible for pumpkins disappearing in the comic. Come on, Jake, leave pumpkin stealing to the real rogue. Drawing again from the Cherubs, Jake, along with Dirk and Calliope, is one of the few characters to not have a Homestuck version of them drawn by Caliborn, probably out of the Cherubs' begrudging respect or vile hatred towards the 3. Kinda hard to tell which it is sometimes. In trickster form, Jake continues his connection with Caliborn, showing that the green skull on his shirt has turned into a little Cal head. Jake is also the only character to go God tier while in his original body. All the others possess their dream selves by that point, and Jake's allergy to peanuts caused his sleeping dream self an early death. His ectobiological son John Egbert also has an allergy to peanuts. Hussey also brought up that the 2 also share the same initials, J.E., and at one point they both had the same initials for their Pester Chum accounts, G.T. The 2 also love terrible movies, to the point where Jake and the brain ghost version of Dirk Strider unintentionally quote Nick Cage from the movie Snake Eyes. Oxygen. We touched on the subject of the hope aspect back in the Eridan Ampera Fridgestuck episode, but let's see how it affects Jake specifically as a character. According to the extended Zodiac quiz, those bound to the aspect of hope are driven first and foremost by their convictions. They do right for right's sake and are quick to come to the aid of anyone they deem to be experiencing injustice. Which fits Jake, considering that he was willing to beat up Mina Paces based solely on the false assumption that she was the younger version of the Condus, who was currently screwing with their planet. Dude didn't even have fist kind, and he threw down hard. As mentioned earlier, Jake also had a brain ghost Dirk that only he, and Terezi Pyrope as a seer of mind, could detect. No one is particularly sure where this Strider manifestation came from. but Calliope says that the heart aspect may cause splintering in the hero's personality, and this splinter, when exposed to Jake's powers of belief and friendship, became real, if only temporarily, in a session that got rebooted anyway, so it didn't even matter. Because of this, Jake's Ghost Dirk is largely considered to be a mashup between Dirk and Jake's powers. I mean, I guess Jake was talking to a Dirk splinter, and not just an imaginary friend dwelling in his mind. I mean, what kind of weirdo talks to representative versions of their own subconscious? Complete weirdos, am I right? Why did the camera pan over to us? It's a bit psyche, keep up. Tacking a bit of Eridan towards the end of this section, if you found it strange that the troll's OP firearm, Ahab's crosshairs, got outclassed by the white science wand gifted to him by Kanaya Merriam, you have every right to feel so. But consider that because of his hope aspect, Eridan simply believed that the wand was uber powerful, and through that power of belief, he was able to destroy anything he wanted with hope. Now, while nothing about this class is set in stone, it's largely believed that a page provides others with their aspect or creates their aspect. Both definitions make sense considering Tavros as a page of breath, supplied Vriska with a ghost army comprised of his friends that he made in the dream bubbles. And Jake English managed to manifest a tally-ho lot of white science power, including angels, when motivated. Real-world pages were traditionally young male attendants and messengers in service of a nobleman. Not only does this give some credence that the page is one of the few male-only classes in the comic, but also why Caliborn shows an unusual amount of attention towards Jake. The Lord of Time wanted a servant, and get served he did! One thing that I particularly liked about the page class is that its costumes have, in my personal opinion, significant details. We see from the dream bubbles that the combination of hood and robes for God-tier Tavros gives him the appearance of not only his boy Skylark Flarp costume, but also his childhood hero, Pupa Pan. In turn, Jake's robes can be seen as a callback to one of his favorite fictional characters, Laura Croft, because of the skin-tight short shorts. Always be careful what you wish for. However, in terms of the overall look of the God-tier robes, if you take into account the cape, and that it looks like the heroes are sporting a pair of briefs, they kind of resemble the outfit of Superman, the Man of Steel. Keep in mind that Jake has a love of comics. His ex-boyfriend's planet was of tombs and Krypton, and how could we forget that the S stands for hope? Many people, including myself, like to compare members of the same Spurb class to see what similar qualities they have with each other. But if I had to guess what Tavros, Jake, and Horace Zahak have in common, it would be social awkwardness? Tavros had crippling social anxiety. Horace was so self-absorbed to the point where he would ignore the feelings of his mate Sprit, and Jake had a level of obliviousness during social interaction that would rival Ash Ketchum from the original Pokemon series. And he lacked the ability to tell people if they were overstepping their bounds. Which is completely understandable, considering Jake was living in near social isolation for about 15 years on an island, naturally going on a big team-building adventure designed to deliberately take you out of your comfort zone would be hard for him. In fact, Jake is labeled as an underdog by his class spec alone. Brain Ghost Dirk, Caliborn, and Arania know of Jake's untapped potential early on. Arania even saying that while the page is the most difficult class and that hope is the most difficult aspect, both offer the biggest payoff, inferring that if he manages to master both, Jake would be the most powerful player in the multi-session. And the last fridge fact for Jake English is, speaking of the circuit, before Game Over kicked us all in the feels after the Gigapause, Jake's mind was healed by Arania. unwillingly. A literal unreciprocated mind frack, if you will. This isn't the first time a version of Arania has done this kind of thing, but it's still disturbing, especially since we're seeing it as it happened. I'm sure there was a way that Arania could have used her mind-curing powers in a more helpful and not invasive fashion. Jake Neytiri, this is not. Thank you guys so much for watching this Fridgestuck episode for Jake English. I hope you enjoyed. Any facts I missed? Do you have a character or concept that you'd like to see? Leave it down in a comment below and it might end up on the show someday. Be sure to give a like, comment, subscribe, share with a friend, and check out my Patreon. And I will see you all next time. Bye!
Then we get a cool fact. Jake is their father. But this isn't surprising. Jake is everyone's father. Jake is your father.